kidding and the ribbing about getting his hair cut and all of that. He took it all like a drum major.
He didn't shout. He didn't rant. Ed Sullivan just gave a look, and the damage was done. When he didn't like you, he didn't argue. He vanished you.
That always will remain as a highlight.
For over 20 years, Ed Sullivan controlled America's biggest stage. He introduced the Beatles, made Elvis a household name, and gave birth to primetime music television. But for all the stars he welcomed, there were a few he shut out. Permanently. One performance. One mistake. That's all it took. He didn't believe in second chances. He believed in silence. He built legends. But behind closed doors, he buried a few too. The Doors, Bo Diddley, Jackie Mason, Bob Dylan, Elvis Presley. Some were banned for rebellion, others for one wrong word, but the result was always the same. Sullivan made sure they never came back.
As a popular personality, I was totally destroyed. Basically, they kept me out of the big time for a minimum of 18 to 20 years.
This wasn't about ratings, it was about control. And when that control slipped, even for a second, Ed made sure the world remembered who ran the show.
Oh, I hope not.
Well, I suppose you must have some opinions on the space program.
He let hundreds pass through that stage, but the ones who crossed the line, he erased them, quietly, completely. And these 5 names, he never forgot them, and never forgave them either. Number 1. Jim Morrison. Some artists challenged the rules. Jim Morrison broke them on live television. Ed Sullivan didn't just host the Doors, he tried to control them. Before their appearance in 1967, Sullivan's producers gave the band a single instruction. Don't sing the word higher. CBS didn't want drug references aired coast to coast. Morrison nodded in agreement, then walked out and sang it anyway. He stared straight into the lens, calm as ever, and delivered the line like it was sacred. No censor, no compromise. Morrison later said, "I just looked at it like this. We came to play our song, so we played our song." To the audience, it looked like a cool rebellion. To Ed Sullivan, it was direct defiance. The fallout was instant. Sullivan's team was furious. The band had gone against a nationally televised promise, and Ed wasn't used to losing control on his own stage. But instead of exploding, he went cold. One of Sullivan's producers reportedly said, "You'll never do this show again." And that was it. No second chances, no future bookings. The Doors were blacklisted with a single sentence. It wasn't about profanity or outrage, it was about authority. Morrison had flipped the power dynamic on live TV and made Ed look like the one who blinked. Sullivan had built his empire by controlling the moment, timing, delivery, clean acts with mass appeal. Morrison brought none of that, he brought risk. And while fans saw a moment of raw rock authenticity, Sullivan saw something else. Unfiltered energy he couldn't manage and wouldn't forgive. In a later interview, bandmate Robbie Krieger said, "We weren't trying to be disrespectful, but you couldn't ask Jim to pretend." Behind the curtain, Sullivan's blacklist wasn't about public image, it was personal. He didn't need chaos, he wanted order. Morrison brought fire, and Ed closed the door. The Doors never played the show again, and Sullivan never gave another band that kind of creative freedom on his stage again. Morrison didn't just test the system, he rewrote the terms in real time and walked away like it was nothing. That performance didn't ruin Sullivan's show, but it changed the way he ran it. Number 2. Bo Diddley. Bo Diddley came on the Ed Sullivan Show to perform. What he left with was a lifetime ban. It was 1955. Diddley had just broken onto the scene with a driving beat and a stage presence no one had seen before. His name was electric. His sound, revolutionary. Before the show, Ed Sullivan's team told him to perform a cover of 16 Tons, a slow country-style tune that fit network standards. But when Diddley hit the stage, he launched straight into his own song, Bo Diddley. He played it with full confidence, no hesitation, no explanation. Bo later said, "I did what I was known for. I didn't think I needed to ask." The crowd loved it, but Sullivan didn't. What followed backstage wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. Sullivan felt disrespected, and his reaction was swift. He cut ties completely. No second song, no handshake, no invite to return. Diddley was banned from the show for life. The truth is, Diddley hadn't intended to defy Sullivan. He'd assumed the order to play 16 tons was a mistake. After all, no one came to see Bo Diddley not play Bo Diddley. But Ed Sullivan didn't see it as a misunderstanding. He saw it as insubordination. In a later interview, Diddley reflected, "I was young. I didn't know how much that moment would cost me. And the cost was steep. The Ed Sullivan Show was the biggest stage in America. A single appearance could launch a career overnight. Being banned from it, especially as a black artist in the 1950s, meant getting boxed out of millions of homes. What hurt more wasn't the ban itself, it was the silence that followed. Sullivan never publicly addressed it. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't defend the decision. He just moved on. Bo Diddley didn't. He kept performing, kept recording. His influence only grew, with artists from the Rolling Stones to the Clash crediting his rhythm and swagger. But for years, the Sullivan Show remained a reminder of the door that slammed shut before it ever fully opened. Diddley once said, "I was one song away from changing everything, but that door never opened again." It wasn't about the music, it was about control. And in Sullivan's world, there was no room for improvisation, especially from someone who refused to apologize. Diddley never returned, but his beat never left. Number 3. Jackie Mason. Some bands are loud. Jackie Mason's was silent and permanent. In 1964, Jackie Mason was one of the fastest rising comedians in the country, sharp, fearless, and unfiltered. He wasn't made for family-safe variety TV, but the Ed Sullivan Show gave him a shot. He walked onto that stage with swagger and left it with a lifetime ban. The performance itself was typical Mason: rapid-fire delivery, big gestures, and constant crowd engagement. But something happened mid-set. Sullivan, running tight on time, reportedly held up fingers off-camera to signal how many minutes Mason had left. And then Mason made a gesture back. Mason later said, "I made a joke with my fingers. He thought I gave him the finger. I swear on my life, I didn't." The moment was brief. Blink and you missed it. But Ed didn't blink. Backstage, Sullivan erupted. He accused Mason of obscene behavior during a family broadcast, and with barely a conversation, the verdict was handed down. Jackie Mason was never to appear on the show again.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Mason tried to clear the air, publicly denied the accusation. He even offered to show the footage in slow motion to prove he was innocent. But it didn't matter. Ed had made up his mind, and when Sullivan shut a door, it stayed shut. Years later, Mason said, "It wasn't personal for me, but it was definitely personal for him." The ban didn't end Mason's career. He continued performing, touring, and eventually won a Tony for his one-man Broadway show. But for nearly 2 decades, one of America's biggest platforms was off-limits to him. Sullivan never issued a public apology. Even after CBS reportedly reviewed the tape and cleared Mason of wrongdoing, the ban stayed in place. Mason would later joke, "It was the most expensive joke I ever told, because I didn't even tell it." By the time the truth caught up, it didn't matter. Mason was already a cautionary tale. Sullivan didn't need proof, he needed control, and when a performer even looked like they were mocking that control, he didn't hesitate. Jackie Mason didn't break any rules that night, but he challenged the wrong man's patience, on live television, and for Ed Sullivan, that was enough. Number 4. Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan was booked. The slot was confirmed. Then he walked away from the Ed Sullivan Show, by choice. In 1963, Dylan was just starting to break through. Folk music's quiet firestarter. He wasn't flashy, he didn't smile for the camera, but when he walked into CBS Studio 50 to rehearse Talk in John Birch Paranoid Blues, everyone knew it wasn't just a song, it was a warning. The lyrics were political, satirical, targeted. The network got nervous. CBS execs pulled Sullivan aside and said Dylan had to switch songs, something safer, something less controversial. But Dylan didn't change a word. He later explained, "I couldn't say what they wanted me to say, and I couldn't not say what I meant." The moment Sullivan heard Dylan wouldn't budge, he went quiet. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He just let him go. Dylan walked off the set without performing. No debut, no exposure, just a quiet exit that echoed for decades.
You don't need to call where you'll go from here. You know where it is?
Dylan was never banned, not officially, but he was never invited back either. And for Ed Sullivan, that silence spoke volumes. In an interview years later, Dylan said, "It wasn't about the song, it was about freedom." It's one of the rare moments where Sullivan didn't act directly, but acted definitively. He didn't blacklist Dylan the way he did others, but he never tried to book him again, not after Dylan refused to bend. In a time when careers were built on network TV, Dylan turned it down on principle. And while the audience never saw that performance, the music world never forgot it. That missing song became part of Dylan's legend. Music historian Robert Shelton once wrote, "Dylan walking out of the Ed Sullivan Show was the beginning of him walking his own path, no matter who was watching." For Sullivan, it was a missed opportunity. For Dylan, it was a defining stand. No compromise, no drama. Just a young songwriter walking out the same way he came in, with his guitar and his voice fully intact. And that's what made him dangerous. Not his lyrics, his refusal to trade them for airtime. Number 5. Elvis Presley. Ed Sullivan didn't want Elvis Presley on his show. At first, he refused outright. In 1956, Elvis was exploding. His dance moves, voice, and look were changing the culture overnight. But Sullivan didn't see a revolution, he saw a risk, a performance that could cross the line in front of millions. And Ed Sullivan didn't take risks. So the Ed Sullivan Show said no, until America said yes. Elvis debuted on The Milton Berle Show, then The Steve Allen Show. Each appearance sent ratings through the roof, and headlines into overdrive. Sullivan couldn't ignore it anymore. He booked Elvis for 3 shows, but he didn't surrender. He limited the camera angles, controlled the shots. By the final appearance, Elvis was filmed only from the waist up. When asked about it, Sullivan said, "We've got a show to run, we want to keep it respectable." The performances still broke records, but something lingered beneath the surface. Sullivan never truly embraced Elvis. He introduced him politely, even complimented him on air, but off camera, the tension never left. Sullivan praised Elvis as a real decent fine boy. But insiders knew the message had been managed. Years later, a CBS stagehand recalled, "It wasn't personal, Ed just didn't like losing control." The third performance would be the last. Elvis never returned to Sullivan's stage, not because of scandal or fallout, but because neither man wanted a fourth. There was no ban, no blacklist, just distance. Elvis moved on to movies, tours. His myth grew larger than any TV screen, but that camera frame, from the waist up, became a permanent symbol. Control over charisma, boundaries over brilliance. In a rare offhand comment, Sullivan once said, "There's only room for one star at a time, and it's my show." That was the story of Elvis on The Ed Sullivan Show. Not a scandal, not a fight, a power struggle, quiet, calculated, and final. Sullivan didn't hate Elvis, but he didn't love what Elvis represented: unpredictability, momentum, danger. It wasn't just a generational clash, it was a broadcast war. Ratings won, but trust never returned. Elvis left the stage as a global icon. Sullivan stayed in the director's chair, and neither looked back. Ed Sullivan didn't slam doors, he just stopped opening them. One mistake, one defiant lyric, one unfiltered gesture, and the silence was permanent. Some of these artists changed music history, but to Sullivan, that didn't matter, not if the trust was broken, because for him, talent wasn't the test, obedience was, and reputation didn't buy redemption. And once you failed it, you weren't just off the lineup, you were erased from the legacy. So who else do you think rubbed Sullivan the wrong way, but got lucky? Was there a sixth name waiting just outside the frame? Drop your theories in the comments, And if you're into deep dives like this, stick around. We're just getting started. More names, more myths, more ghosts of TV history. Because on Ed Sullivan's stage, the most dangerous sound wasn't a scream or a lyric. It was silence, and he used it like a weapon.